Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. My name's Orla Bartolo. I'm the Assistant Deputy Commissioner of the Digital Enforcement and Intelligence Branch in the Canadian Competition Bureau, and I'm your moderator for today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which I am is the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. The Algonquin people have lived on this land since time immemorial. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to present in this territory. Organizations, competition authorities, and society as a whole are taking measures to modernize and digitalize, seeking out ways to increase efficiency. Today's webinar is part of the Agency Effectiveness Working Group's multi-year project on digitalization, innovation, and agency effectiveness, which explores various strategies and approaches used by agencies when harnessing digitalization to improve agency effectiveness. The pandemic accelerated this for many organizations. It emphasized the importance of adapting and innovating the way we work to ensure we can address new challenges while keeping pace and respond to the digitalization of the economy. Before getting started, there are a few housekeeping items. I would like to remind you to please ensure that your microphone and cameras remain off during the session to minimize the strain on the bandwidth and to ensure there's no disruptions. I encourage you to use the chat function in Zoom to participate and share your comments or questions for the panelists during this session. And we will, of course, monitor the chat, and there will be time reserved towards the end of the webinar for question and answers from the audience. We'll also be using the Zoom polling function throughout today's session to hear directly from you. So the working group's 2021 report looked at three key areas: agencies, digital environment and tools, digital goals and strategies, and finally the adoption of new skills. And the last is where our discussion will be focused for today. And so I'm thrilled to introduce our panel of esteemed speakers. Jane Lynn is joining us for representing the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission. Jane is the General Manager of Data and Intelligence at the ACCC, where she has worked for over 15 years in enforcement and intelligence roles, investigating and litigating consumer and competition matters. She's also worked as a competition policy advisor for Ofcom, the UK's communications regulator, and has qualifications in law, economics, and political economy. In her current role, Jane leads the ACCC's Data and Intelligence Branch, which incorporates 4 in-house teams: the Strategic Data Analysis Unit, the ACCC's Info Center, Legal Technology Services, and finally, an intelligence team. The branch supports the ACCC to meet its objectives by collecting and using data and intelligence to inform strategic decision-making, providing specialist advice on data analysis and e-discovery, advancing evidence handling procedures, data governance, and developing tools and sources. Joining us from Brazil at the Administrative Council for Economic Defense, CADE, is Marcus Vinicius Silveira de Sá. He's the coordinator for mergers and antitrust at CADE's Unit 1. He received postgraduate education in antitrust and economic law and in corporate law and contracts. Marcus is currently pursuing a master's degree in economic law and development. And finally, from l'Autorité de la Concurrence en France, we have Eloise Vandenhand. After studying law in France and the United States, Eloise began her career as a lawyer specializing in competition law. She was the advisor to the Secretary General of the French Presidency of the Council of the European Union in 2008. She was then appointed to the office of the Minister of Economic and Finance in 2009 as technical advisor for European affairs. From 2012, she joined the DGCCRF, where she specialized in litigation relating to restrictive competitive practices. In 2018, Elodie was appointed counsel to the president of the L'Autorité de la Concurrence, where she was responsible for the follow-up of projects to modernize the institutions and contribute to discussions on adapting competition rules to the challenges of the digital economy. Since September 2020, she worked as a case officer in the Digital Enforcement Unit, and in January 2021 was appointed deputy head. A warm welcome to you all. Thank you for taking the time to be part of this webinar today. So at the Canadian Competition Bureau, to give you a bit of the Canadian perspective, we received a budget increase from our government to ensure we have the resources we need to tackle issues in the digital economy. Priority number one for this additional funding was the establishment of the new Digital Enforcement and Intelligence Branch. We're referring to this new branch as CANARI, which stands for Competition Through Analytics, Research and Intelligence. And the new branch will focus on a number of areas, including understanding how firms are using data and technology and how this may impact competition in the marketplace. We'll also be examining how firms may affect consumer behavior through the use of technology and data, and where there are differences in how particular subsets of Canada's population are affected. We're going to be getting more out of the data to inform our enforcement and promotion work. And finally, identifying the types of remedies we need to impose on digital firms to protect competition in the marketplace. As we get the new branch up and running, recruitment and retention of non-traditional digital expertise is top of mind. And so today's panel is of great interest to me and many of us in Canada. As I mentioned earlier, we are going to be using some polling questions throughout the webinar. So here's the first one. I'd encourage everyone to participate, and this is just to kick off our first theme. And so our first theme is recruitment and retention, and going back to the working group's report, it highlights how agencies differ as to how they integrate new digital skills into their organizations. At the time of the report, 1 in 5 respondents had already recruited new digital staff. The majority of respondents were mostly training existing staff. So if we can close the poll. And there you can see it's we're about 89% of us have acknowledged it is really a combination of both. So with that, let's start off our discussion with the panelists. So the working group report identified that the ACCC has teams with digital and data focus with a variety of professional backgrounds. Jane, what has been your agency's approach to pulling in these new skills?
Thanks, Paula. I'll just briefly explain the teams I'm talking about first. So we have a digital platforms branch, which was formed in 2020 to monitor and report on the state of competition and consumer protection in digital platform markets. And that includes identifying enforcement action and undertaking inquiries. And that team has about 25 to 30 staff who have a mixture of legal, economic and policy backgrounds, sort of traditional competition regulatory staff. That branch works closely with the strategic data analysis unit, which is in my branch that you mentioned earlier. And that consists of a team of about 20, mostly data analysts, but also some data scientists who help frame the analysis and identify data that we can collect, and also then obviously conduct that analysis. They actually assist all areas of the agency in their work, but they specifically assist the digital platforms branch quite heavily in understanding the behaviour of the platforms. That team, their backgrounds are a variety of different educational qualifications. You've got statistics, people with economics backgrounds, maths, social sciences, actuarial and finance degrees, of course, data scientists, but also lawyers. And they sit in a branch which also includes our intelligence analysts, many of whom have sort of database and SQL type skills, and also our legal technologists and digital forensics specialists. And both of those teams are, of course, supported by our IT department, which has a mix of traditional IT skill sets, and they help us to implement new capabilities and tools. In terms of how we've brought in these skills, of course, we conduct external recruitment. We advertise on LinkedIn and other recruitment platforms. We try to target universities, and this has been, fairly effective for certain types of skill sets, particularly at legal technologists, digital forensics qualifications. But we have found it quite difficult to bring in staff with industry experience, like digital platform experience, and that's obviously because of the demand in the marketplace and the fact that as a public service agency we can't pay the same kind of salaries. Many of the original members of the data analysis unit and the digital platforms branch were existing ACCC staff. In the case of the data analysis unit, they were people with analytical backgrounds, like economics, statistics, mathematics, who'd been doing analytical work elsewhere in the agency, like our economics group and our infrastructure regulation division. So they sort of had the capabilities and the aptitude already to carry out the kinds of work that they're doing more and more of. But really, for us, the major way in which we're bringing in the skills we need is upskilling our staff, and that is through, we have two main mechanisms through which we do that. So one is our studies assistance program, where we the agency provides quite substantial financial assistance and also time off for study to staff members who wish to undertake a qualification that is directly relevant to their work and might benefit the agency. So we've seen a number of staff retrain as data scientists through that method. We also have a data literacy and digital literacy program, which we are rolling out currently to the whole agency. And that targets a range of different cohorts depending on the extent to which they need to work with data and digital tools. But we do really feel as though this is an important way for us to upskill, bring the skill sets we need into the agency. And the benefit of that, of course, is that those staff already understand competition law principles and economics, and they know how we operate as an agency. So that's been very effective. Our government is also implementing a number of initiatives aimed at training and also helping to advertise roles and carry out recruitment for digital roles. So there are a number of online digital marketplaces where you can post advertisements for staff. So we use that quite a lot. It's particularly useful for identifying IT contractors, people who we need to carry out short-term pieces of work, data cleaning, that kind of thing. But it can be a way of also identifying longer-term stuff. And we also have a digital and data graduate program. And the other method that we have used, which has been quite useful, has been secondments and exchanges with other government departments, both in Australia and our overseas counterpart agencies. I'll leave it there. Thanks, Ola.
It sounds like the success has been kind of in your multi-pronged approach of not just focusing on solely recruiting, but also acknowledging the different ways of upskilling internally. So I'm sure that's leading to the success already within your agency. Eloise, at l'Autorité de la Concurrence, you already have data scientists and engineers in your organization. What has the experience been in France when recruiting and retaining these expertise?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm jumping in on behalf of Jan Gutman, who was supposed to be here, but couldn't at the last minute. So please bear with me. Yes, so we're actually a very small team. I'll just start to maybe explain how the structure within the authority is with respect to digital matters. So obviously, so the Digital Economy Unit was created in September 2020, was launched earlier that year. But obviously the authority didn't start dealing with digital matters in 2020. There was already a competition unit specializing in telecom / digital matters. So when in 2020 we launched the Digital Economy Unit, the purpose was to have specialists able to have data, like more in-depth data knowledge. So we're a team of 4 for now, plus assistant case manager at the moment. So it's quite small compared to the ACCC for now, at least. And so the head of the Digital Economy Unit is an engineer data specialist. I am a lawyer by practice, and I'm the only one with a law expertise within the team. And so you have 2 other data specialists within the team. One came from the unit which was specialized in digital, and the other one came from the Home Ministry and was already handling data matters. So I guess the recruiting was, sort of a mix in terms of inside the French Competition Authority and outside as well. I think in terms of recruiting, we had a lot of the same issues that was underlined by Jane, which was obviously it's harder to recruit when you're a public authority because it's hard to match the salaries that may be expected with those kind of profiles. I think, like even though you can't match exactly the salary, you have a lot of arguments that can be made about, the advantages to work in, evolving matters within the government, the public sector, the remote working conditions, the fact that you have a diversity in terms of work. And so I think you have a lot of advantages to put forward, and we're very happy with the recruitment that we've been conducting so far. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Eloise. Jane, I know you touched on it just initially. At the ACCC, you'd mentioned the development of the and focusing on upskilling those who don't have the technical background. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yep, sure. So as I mentioned, we have a studies assistance program. It's pretty easy to kind of understand the concept. We rely on university qualifications there, but in terms of what we're doing internally, first of all, our government, the Australian Public Service, has identified the need for a really steep uplift in digital and data skills across the whole government. And that applies to the ACCC as much as any other agency. So the government has a range of programs in place. I mentioned them a little bit earlier, which are aimed at bringing in more specialised skill sets into the government, the public service, and keeping them there. So, really creating a value proposition around working in the public service, the benefits that are associated with that, as Elodie touched on, but also providing some concrete programs to assist the agencies themselves. So we have a graduate program for data and digital graduates from universities. They come straight to us from university. Some of them are absolutely fantastic. The government has also created capability frameworks and data learning pathways to give you an idea of the skill sets that should be required over the next sort of 5 years or so. They have put together some training programs. This is still a work in progress, but they include some curated content for data professionals and leadership training also for senior executives around the value of data. And they've created some communities of practice for the data professionals so that they can meet together and share best practices. But in-house, we are developing our own pathways. We are leveraging the capability frameworks that the government has prepared, and we are using those to create schedules, learning pathways for all of our employees. We've divided them up into 4 different cohorts. So we've got all employees. Everybody requires at least basic data and digital literacy training. We have our leaders who have a specific, requirement in terms of being able to understand the way that data and digital technologies should be used in decision making, and also understanding the value of digital tools and data assets. We have our data practitioners. So those are people who tend to work regularly with data, and they need access to training on analytical methods and tools. And then we have our data professionals. So those are people who are actually employed in data roles, and our digital professionals who are employed in specific digital roles, and they have even more specialized training available to them. So, and I can talk more about the actual skill sets that we're focusing on later if anyone's interested. The way we're doing it is we're starting with a range of online learning content that we've sourced from the government curated content that I mentioned earlier, and also LinkedIn Learning, and some of our vendors. Microsoft, for example, do quite a lot of training. And we're now currently completing procurement of additional e-learning content, which is tailored to the ACCC specific contexts, as well as live online courses. And the intention is to continue adding content to the learning pathways over time.
Thank you. Marcus, in Brazil, you've recruited new members while also, like the others, investing in upgrading skills. Could you tell us about the approach at CADE?
Sure. As you mentioned, CADE decided to take a hybrid approach when it comes to acquiring digital skills. So CADE is hiring new members while also training its current staff in many fields of expertise, including those usually related to the digital economy, such as data science, data architecture, data engineering, programming, coding, and IT forensics, but also more traditional competition-related fields such as economics, statistics, and so on. And to do so, CADE not only invests and finances some doctorate and master's degrees for its officials, but also promotes training programs, many of which rely on the expertise acquired by those officials in these post-graduation courses, in like a ever-improving sharing experience cycle.
Thank you. It's very clear that there's not one clear way of doing it, and it really does depend on the agency. In Canada, in the federal government, we do have the Canada School of Public Service that has a digital academy, and within that there is a suite of learning paths to kind of get at what some of you were saying in terms of just updating the general competencies, or at least having courses available to public servants. We also do have communities of practices for our digital experts, and hearing the approach at each of your agencies, it also shows the importance of prioritizing more targeted learning and development internally. And just, on the recruitment front, you've touched on it too as well. I think it is hard to compete on this solely on the salary side of things for digital experts, but the impact of our work, the support and the engagement that you can get in the public service can often be a selling feature for many people. And so let's move on to our second theme, and we can launch the second polling question. And this question is, what digital roles do you consider to be essential for a competition agency's successful digital transformation? So you can click multiple options here. We'll give people a bit of time to submit their answers there. And so our second theme is in the integration of new expertise. At the Bureau, we have many highly qualified employees that were recruited in our enforcement and advocacy business lines, but they also have strong digital skills. So even when their education is predominantly in a different field, they are coming to us with very diverse experience and an ongoing interest to engage in their own development. So this pairs well with the recruitment of specialists. And for us, we're only getting started. So maybe we can just close the poll and see the results there. So the majority, again, there's a clear front runner for this question. We're seeing data science, data engineers, and data analysts, but also a fair amount of emphasis on the IT forensic specialists and a bit more too on the programmers, software developers, and chief digital officers. So Elodie, at l'Autorité de la Concurrence, the digital economy unit was created 16 months ago. And you've already spoken about retaining new expertise. How have these specialists integrated within your agency?
I think they've integrated very well. At least they're still here. So I think it helped because Jan, the head of the digital economy unit, and me to a lesser extent, we've been case enders. So I think it helps to know how to identify the way to integrate within a team and what are the specific steps of a case, the important steps that we can't miss, and how to integrate into the other team. The way we are settled, and maybe that's how I should have begun, is we're mostly a support team, but we're also handling some matters ourselves. So when you launch a new unit, you have to sort of integrate within the Bureau d'Autorité as well, because they have to learn how to work with you and work with new people. And so you have to identify the way you can bring added value to their work. So I think the first step is to show what you are capable of doing, do it step by step. It's sort of a learning curve, really, to show this is what you have been doing so far, but here is a faster way to do that. And this is how I can help you doing that. And because we have the resources to do it. So I think it also helps to work together on a case. And I think it also helps, to integrate, because they are very complementary in terms of data skills, of a set of skills, because a lot of the data scientists are not competition specialists. So I think there is an easy way to show that you are obviously in charge of the handling of the case, and we are able to help you because this is a specific set of skills that I have and you probably don't, and this is how we can help you being more efficient. And so I think the plan is to arrange for the long term, make sure that their skills develop over time, make sure that they keep learning as well, because you need to be able to show them that they are not only bringing skills to other people, but they're also developing new set of skills themselves. So you start with simple cases and you get into more and more complicated cases as time goes by.
Thank you very much. Marcus, you've spoken a bit about the hybrid approach and blending the ideas of recruiting specialists and also upskilling current staff. Has there been unexpected or unforeseen opportunities relating to retention, given the approach in your agency?
Well, since CADI began accelerating its digitalization process due to the pandemic, we realized that virtual/remote work could help us increase our retention rates and improve the already positive results we had of our hybrid approach of training and recruiting. Just to briefly explain what I mean is that Since it was no longer required for our team members to do in-person work at CADE, we realized we could expand our borders and hire staff that lived or studied in other states of Brazil or even abroad. So in my unit, for example, we currently have a team member living in Germany, and until recently, we had another one that was living in China. So if it wasn't for this new tool, we probably wouldn't be able to have them working with us today. And I gotta say, they really increase our team value. So I think that's the best example I can give you.
Thank you very much. I know in Canada, we've had employees move to different locations since the pandemic started. And of course, the need to be close to a physical office space has changed. Even in my branch right now, this summer, we're taking a national approach to our student recruitment. And it's amazing to think of how much the way we work has changed and the opportunities it presents us in terms of recruiting and integrating new digital experts. So let's move on to the next question, and this I'll ask to all three of you. Related to the retention of digital expertise, I'd like to ask you what have been some of the immediate impacts and benefits to your agency's digitalization and advancing your digital strategy. So Elodie, why don't we start with you?
Classic. So I'm sorry, so your questions are about the immediate impacts and benefits? Yeah. So I think I see it right now. So we've initiated a sector inquiry on the topic of the cloud. And this is, as you may know, something very complicated with a lot of layers. And I'm a lawyer, so I approached it the lawyer way. So I read a lot of the legal opinions about it, and I understand the case. So, but when we talk to a lot of the stakeholders, there is a lot of technicity involved, and we've been talking a lot with the data scientists within our team to understand how maybe to ask more sophisticated questions, to understand the topic in depth. And so this has been very helpful in order to help us just have a deeper understanding of the issue. I would say that there is obviously a lot of like a time-saving aspect to the work as well. Obviously, we have developed a lot of automated tools, which has been very useful in terms of our work, especially for case handlers. I'm thinking about scraping techniques, for example, that was not used at a wide level within the French Competition Authority. This is also very useful, obviously, for the handling of the case. One of our data scientists was involved in a case that was very complicated with Apple and the interim measures on the targeted advertising, and the interim measure case was published within 6 months, which is pretty fast. And we understand from sort of the experience sharing with the team that the involvement of our data scientists was very decisive and helpful in that context. So I would say the in-depth understanding of digital issues and obviously time savings.
Jane, what's your thoughts on this question?
Thanks, Ola. Well, I think obviously it's quite similar to Elodie. One of the most immediate and public impacts has been the ability for us to conduct robust and defensible analysis of the conduct of digital platforms for our enforcement work and our market studies. And the ACCC has developed a good reputation for this work, which has been very strongly enhanced and influenced by the in-house data experts who've contributed their expertise. to things like analyzing algorithms, identifying and collecting, and then analyzing particular data to monitor and understand entities' conduct, and then also contributing to discussions and advocacy about remedies and how behaviour could be regulated. More broadly, we're engaged in our agency is currently engaged in a large digital transformation project, which commenced a couple of years ago now. It consists of an IT uplift as well as improvements to our data analytics capabilities. And the role of our in-house data and digital professionals has been instrumental in helping to prepare the strategies that sit within that program, and create roadmaps for the future in terms of where we need to be as a competition regulator in the next sort of 3 to 5 years. The large number of digital and data experts in-house has allowed us to identify new capabilities that we will need to carry out our work. So things like Elodie mentioned, web scraping, the ability to analyze algorithms, using machine learning and automation to make processes more efficient, and also to work with our IT department to identify projects that will assist us to build new capabilities. And the digital and data experts within my team have been involved in testing some new tools, proofs of concept, experiments to see how new tools and techniques can improve the way that we work and create new opportunities, particularly for proactive competition detection.
And Marcus, what have been some of the benefits to CAGE's digitalization and advancing your digital strategies?
Well, when CADE offers the possibility of tuition reimbursement, it requires that the staff members stay at CADE for an equivalent period after the end of the course to allow the person to share the expertise acquired with the other team members and for it to be of use to improve CADE's tools. So as an example of new tools developed by digital experts after attending some postgraduate studies, I can name our market data platform that we call here PIN. That it's an interactive dashboard and graphic generator that aggregates public data of some regulated markets, integrating different systems to make relevant information on competition constantly available and updated in one place. It's a public available platform, so unfortunately it doesn't have yet an English version to it, but we already have many success and examples of people in Brazil using this platform to generate graphics and get some information about the markets. And I could also mention Click Leniência, our leniency request. That's a digital tool that allows applicants to submit online market requests. And to closure here, we could also mention our currently under development digital merger notice form for those mergers suitable for fast track procedures, and that we hope with it to automatize the merger review process for simple cases. So all these tools that I just mentioned are examples of tools that were only developed after CADE invested in its staff.
Very, very interesting. It does seem like from just kind of summing up kind of this theme that there's many benefits and impacts that can be seen across many business lines, and that bringing in the new skills and expertise also introduces new capabilities that are being identified, the capacity to test new tools and kind of meet the challenging or the challenges and demands that come with the more complex investigations and work in the digital economy. So we're moving quickly along, and our last theme for this webinar is delivering on digital strategies. So why don't we launch the last poll question? And has the pandemic affected your digital strategy? And so this last theme, continuing our talk about the role of non-traditional experts in antitrust authorities, the digital transformation. Our enforcement teams are having data scientists, IT forensics, and the effect it is really having on our digitalization. So why don't we close the poll and then see our results? So I'm intrigued. There's 12% that have didn't reply with a yes. But like I think all aspects of our lives, it's hard to say there hasn't been an impact from the pandemic. And so moving on to this theme, Marcus, the working group report mentioned how CAGE used a university innovation lab to develop customized tools as a means to address the challenge of having limited staff to develop these tools in-house. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Sure. Well, sometimes we focus so much on looking for highly qualified experts to hire that we forget to look at universities and the newly developed talents that they offer. So having that in mind, CADE entered a partnership with the Innovation Lab of the University of Brasilia a while back and recently renewed it. And this partnership has already resulted in the development of some very interesting tools. And I'd like to take the time to highlight and quickly explain some of them. The first one is a project still under development called Lorem Ipsum. Its objective is, among other things, to automatize the analysis of evidence and the elaboration of decisive documents by using technology like data mining, AI, ML, and others. One of the ideas behind this project is to allow decisive documents to have templates automatically filled with required elements and leaving for human operation only the decision on the merits and the process review. Another one is our digital questionnaire tool. And in the beginning, a long time ago, CADE used to send its request for information through the mail. And later, when the proceedings evolved to a digital electronic format, it started using emails. Companies then and now have to download the document, answer it, and send it back in a PDF format in order for the file to be manually uploaded to the electronic process. However, with this digital questionnaire we are developing and hope to test real soon, we will allow companies to receive a link to access the digital questionnaire online, and the information that they provide us will then be automatically stored in CADE servers, allowing us to use the data better by, for example, automatically creating tables and market structures. And another one, the last two I'd like to mention right now, to our limited time here, is our jurisprudence search system. That's a publicly available tool that's organized in 6 sections that allow for a quick and complete research of CADE's precedents. It is also possible to apply different filters to refine the search and find specific documents, such as the recommendation issued by Office of the General Superintendent or the vote of a commissioner from CADE's tribunal. So I think that's the best I can offer right now, and I hope it was enough.
Thank you very much, Marcus. Moving on to our next question. What are some of the creative ways for acquiring digital expertise? And are there innovative tools your agencies have used to deliver on your digitalization journey? So Elodie, why don't we start with you on this answer?
I don't know if it's very creative, but I think one of the first steps to acquire digital expertise is to ask other agencies who have developed similar units. So I'm not sure that it's necessary to reinvent the digital wheel. That's what we have done in the digital economy unit. We have talked to other agencies. I'm thinking about the Competition Market Authority. We talked with the ACCC. We talked about Bundeskartellamt. We talked to a lot of different agencies to sort of know what tools they developed, how they handled the relationship within the agency, what was their focus. So that's what we started doing. There is also a new unit that has been created within the government, which is called the PEREN, which is a digital platform expertise. And the idea when that unit was set up by the government was there is a need to mutualize for some techniques within the government, instead of having, I don't know, somebody create an automated tool within the French Competition Authority or within the Telecom Authority or within the Data Protection Authority. Maybe there are some tools that can be shared within the agencies and with the government. So we're also exchanging with this unit within the government. A way that, so that's a way that we've been acquiring new techniques in order to applying some of those tools. One way that has been very effective for us was the creation of maps, interactive maps of the companies that were fined by the French Competition Authority since 2009. So it's been available on our website. And so I think it was very striking for people following closely the news on competition to see where the various companies were located that were fined by the French Competition Authority. And we actually had some trouble with it because some competition lawyers complained that it was a way to be sanctioned twice, which was also a way to see that another way of seeing it is maybe it was impactful. So I think that was an important and good means of communication for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jane, what's your perspective from Australia?
Yeah, we actually have used a similar approach to CARJE in partnering with some university data science programs for internships or research projects with their students that are currently carrying out or undertaking data science degrees. So we recently did a project with some students from a University of Technology, which was focused on developing a model or tool that could identify dark patterns by crawling internet, by crawling websites. And we think that's also a really useful way of operating to partner with the universities. Obviously, we get the benefit of the results of the research project, but the students themselves may end up coming to work for us later, in their career or when they finish their degree. They get exposed to the work that we do. They can see how interesting it is. So it's quite a good way also to potentially bring in new talent later on. We have a government scientific research agency, which has a data science arm as well. And we have specifically partnered with them for certain pieces of work. We, a couple of years ago now, had to set up a whole new function around the consumer data right. And the Data 61 team, as they're called, were instrumental in helping us develop things like standards for the capture of certain data from banking institutions. And the other thing I'll mention, I did mention this earlier, but we have an online digital marketplace where you can post short-term opportunities and seek expertise for specific projects. So it might be only 6 weeks, or it might be, a couple of months or longer period, but it's a specific piece of work. It allows you to take a sort of agile approach to building new capabilities or, fixing an existing problem that you might have, and you can just bring in expertise just for discrete pieces of work. It tends to be a more expensive way of doing things on an hourly basis, but it does allow you to that flexibility to be able to find alternative skill sets that we don't have in-house just for short periods of time. So that's been quite helpful as well.
Very interesting. I've my notes that I'm writing down myself from listening to you all are getting quite extensive. So we're coming up close to the end of kind of this initial part of the webinar. So one last question for you all, and we can start with Marcus to answer this, is looking forward, how do you see your digitalization strategy advancing? What's the role for collaboration between competition agencies? And what are the biggest opportunities for collaboration as more agencies advance their digitalization journeys? Marcus?
Thank you. Well, CADE signed a couple of years ago a document called Digital Transformation Plan that aimed at establishing guidelines to broaden CADE's role to provide digital answers to services rendered to citizens and promoting the reduction of bureaucracy and infrastructure costs. The plan basically foresees 23 actions assigned in 3 different phases: changing service to a digital format, interoperability, and systems unification. Today, CADE has already achieved some goals and is looking forward to advancing on others, such as testing the digital questionnaires during a market test. And this tool is also a great example of the importance of collaboration between agencies, since CADE based it on the experience of DigiComp. So when competition agencies collaborate, they can share their experiences and learn from one another, allowing the development of new tools and solutions, as in a way, all agencies are dealing with the same issues and challenges that arise to the digital era. So I'm very fond of this collaboration, and I hope we can all continue to collaborate in many aspects of our daily lives.
Jane, would you like to weigh in on this question?
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, the ACCC is embarking on a big digital transformation journey at the moment, which involves building a lot of new digital and data capabilities. It's an exciting time for us. I do think one of the biggest opportunities in the digitalization journey will be cooperating with other regulators to share tools and techniques and even code. Many of us are investigating the same companies, platforms, practices. There are a range of new techniques, which we've sort of touched on some of, that can help us to interrogate behavior. And I think by sharing the details of those techniques, we can not only increase our individual agency efficiency, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel every time, but we can also send a strong message to the entities that we regulate that we're working together to understand their behavior and curb anti-competitive conduct. Obviously, we're all investigating some of the wealthiest and most technologically advanced platforms and companies in the world. We've talked about the fact that, we can't necessarily match them when it comes to hiring staff on a salary basis. But I think by sort of working together, by having these new skill sets within each of our respective agencies, but joining together, we can kind of increase our collective power and capabilities. And I think that from an ACCC specific perspective, one of the key next steps for us is going to be working on moving our data into a more searchable and scalable data hub with improved governance. And that's quite a challenge. We have a lot of data stored all over the place. Having been operating as an agency for many years now, and we're also trying to improve the methods and formats by which we collect data and evidence and bring them into the agency. And we really benefit from sharing and learning from other agencies about what they're doing in this regard. Just heard from CADE, from Marcus, about some really interesting things that CADE is doing. I know the CMA is doing some great stuff in this field. and we've been engaging with them and other regulators as well. So we're really on a bit of a learning curve, and it's a really great opportunity to find out what others are doing. So as I said, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can just use a similar approach.
And Elodie, from the perspective in France, what would you say are some of the biggest opportunities for collaboration?
I think I agree that the biggest path forward is keep the cooperation, promote cooperation and open source projects. In terms of issues, what can be pretty difficult is to when you talk to another agency, to understand what sort of techniques they've been using, how they've handled the data. And so understand how you can reuse the product of another agency and use it in your own agency. So, I think one of the biggest challenges is actually to implement another agency solution to your own. And I think that's going to be, in terms of cooperation, the biggest challenge that we're going to see in the future. So that's what I would see, but I'm confident that we'll manage to do it.
And so it's been so interesting hearing your various perspectives and approaches, and how you've moved your digitalization journey. Some of my takeaways already from the discussion today are that we have resources that we can tap into right now to enhance our processes and for recruitment and retention, including those with universities and colleges. We can raise digital literacy in our authorities, and we can successfully bridge traditional skills of competition law and economics with the new ones that are much in demand, including data analysis, science, and engineers. We can embed and include our digital specialists in our cases. It helps them understand our work, but it also enhances and has a positive impact on our analysis. And the introduction of new expertise is presenting new opportunities. It's enhancing our effectiveness and efficiency. And we're talking about the benefits of international collaboration, and open idea sharing and discussions like these are key to our future success. And this is going to be especially important as we emerge from the pandemic. And so with that, I'd love to open the floor to any questions that people might have. I'd encourage you to ask those in the chat. I'll give a few minutes if people have some questions. Questions? So here, why don't I ask a question? What digital tools would you identify as most imperative for competition agencies to adopt in the future? And Elodie, since you were the last to speak and kind of up on my screen first, why don't you kick off answering this question?
I don't know if we need necessarily a new digital tool. I think we sort of have the tool that we need. I think now is just finding the right cases to use them. And I think what we need is to test our digital capabilities right now and sort of confront them with the stakeholders, see how they hold in courts. I think it's to test the tools instead of initiate. I don't really see a new digital tool that we would not have at our disposal right now.
Marcus or Jane, do you have any thoughts on kind of digital tools that are most imperative?
I think that with the increasing volumes of data that we are collecting and trying to make sense of as agencies, there are some tools associated with managing that data that will be quite important. So we've talked about, to the extent possible, automating and making digital sort of submissions portals for evidence and information. Having tools that will assist us to manage that data through its life cycle, I think will be really important for agencies. To the extent possible, tools that will allow us to automate some of the detection of relevant information within large data sets. So technology assisted review, for example, which already exists, other types of machine learning that can draw insights from data. And then I think also being able to visualize the insights that we will pull out of large data sets so that we can explain to a judge or a decision maker, what is going on with the data and in a simple way that they can understand.
Okay, so we have a few more questions in the chat. You have spoken about really interesting relationships with universities, but I'm also wondering about other creative, untapped or underutilized resources for acquiring digital expertise. Does anyone have any thoughts on that question?
Well, I can make a brief intervention here. That since I find it really interesting that CADE sometimes uses the United Nations Development Program to hire some experts to help us in some specific projects that we are handling. So I believe it's an example of a not always so used mechanism to acquire digital expertise and to finish some projects.
Thanks, Marcus. Just looking at some of the other questions that are coming in. So the next question, which kind of data or data sets have you found useful in integrating new data scientists to the practical work of the authority? Marcus, Elodie, or Jane, I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that, or maybe more generally to if you have any additional things from what you've said earlier on integrating data scientists into the practical work of your agencies.
One of the things that our data scientists are most heavily involved in is understanding what is happening on digital platforms. So scraping large data sets from things like search engines or other online marketplaces, and then trying to make sense of what's happening from those data sets. That tends to be something that data scientists find quite interesting, and it's a way of sinking their teeth into both the types of data that we collect, but also the methods for understanding what the competition problem might be. So I think that's a good one. Another thing, which is a bit random really, but our data scientists help quite a lot with looking at our corporate data sets. So helping us to make sense of what's going on in terms of the resourcing of our projects, for example, even things like our gender pay gap, things like that sort of help them to understand the way we operate as an agency. Those have been quite helpful ways of connecting them to other employees across the agency. So integration in the sense of starting to feel like they belong within the organization. It's quite a good way for them to contribute and then make those connections.
I agree with Jane about the diversity of the work. I think that's the best way of integrating data scientists, and I think that makes a big argument in terms of retaining those talents, is to make sure that to underline the fact that they will not be working on the same set of data forever, but they are going to be involved in a lot of different projects, coming from working on a case or developing some automated tools for the authority itself in its relationship with the stakeholders, or developing an interactive maps, working in collaboration with universities or national competition authorities, and explaining this to the vice president of the French, or the president of the French Competition Authority. I think that's very, in terms of exposure, in terms of diversity of work, I think that's very interesting.
The next question we have is for the more established competition agency. Do you have a standard operating procedure on digital forensics?
We only have a very small in-house digital forensics capability in terms of actual collection. So we only have one forensic specialist who would be, for example, involved in dawn raids. We would tend to outsource the collection of digital evidence, but we do then have an in-house team who assist with the analysis and management of that. And there are certainly operating procedures that they follow in terms of the way they manage the evidence for us.
That's the same for us. There is a digital forensic team within the French Competition Authorities that is on every dawn raid that is conducted by the French Competition Authority. So you have a procedure that you follow for every dawn raid. This is not within the digital economy unit per se, even though we are being trained to be able to implement it.
Here in CADE, if I may just quickly intervene, we have our intelligence unit, and I don't know how much about it is classified, so I'm not going to enter any details here. But we have what's publicly known, a project is called Project Cerebro, okay? And it has some standards related to digital forensics. We have recent, I think just last year, Brazil and CAD made a contribution to a OECD document regarding digital evidence, and I think what's in there is surely public, so you can just check there if you want. But I'm not going to enter in any more details because I'm not in this unit, and I don't want to get any trouble here, so I'm just closing it.
The last question in the chat here, I think, is a safer question for you, Marcus, and I think Elodie and Jane, you might be able to weigh in on this too. So for agencies with existing data literacy training plans in-house, how do you differentiate and scale data literacy streams for different roles within the organization? So the example given in the chat is support staff versus digital enforcement staff.
Well, at least here in Brazil and my unit, when we are addressing any case, there's obviously a team member that's the responsible for that case, but sometimes it lacks the necessary knowledge about some specific topics. Since, for example, I myself, I'm a lawyer, so I don't have all the knowledge about data gathering and data analytics and everything else. So when I have them on my team, I can sit with them and say something like, okay, here's what we have. We have this problem. I need to understand this. We have this. What can I ask for? What can I get? What should I look into? How can we discuss here internally in order to address the case? So even though in my unit, usually we address a case to a specific person, it doesn't mean that we cannot act like a team, right? So we usually mix and we look for these different type of knowledge staff members so they can complement each other when addressing and facing any challenges. So that's what I can say here.
And I touched on this earlier, but our data literacy program is the learning pathways are dependent upon what your role is in the organization. So there's one for all employees, there's one for people who are leaders, there's one for people who work with data quite a lot, but they're not necessarily employed as a data professional. And then there's a different stream for the data professionals. And you can build on all of these things, of course, if you're so inclined, even if you're not employed in for example, a data role. But yeah, that's the way that we've targeted the training.
I would say that so you have various training programs within the French Competition Authority. I think that should be maybe the next item on our list would be maybe to do data training specifically. I think I think we still focus a lot about. I think we still see it a lot on the legal side of data, and maybe focus a little bit more on the technical aspect of it. Maybe should be on the list. For now, we rely on the training inside the authority and outside of the authority, which you have very good programs, but this is definitely, yeah, still maybe a work in progress.
Thank you, everyone. I'll give a short moment to see if there's any other questions. With that, I'd like to just say that while the pandemic and kind of how we meet and the frequency of webinars and events like this is an opportunity, it's also unfortunate that we don't have more time to dive deeper into the themes and questions we explored. But it is great news that this is one more step in the journey we're all taking to be more proactive, more forward-looking, more collaborative, and more responsive to the challenges of digitalization. I always leave inspired and energized from these events, but all of these events do have people behind the scenes that have worked really hard to put it together. So I do want to extend a wholehearted thank you to Ruda from the Swedish Competition Authority, who has been working with me and the panelists over the last few weeks and putting this all together and shepherding us along to this point. I was also supported by my team within Canada in preparing for today. And we have one last poll question just to gauge kind of how informative this webinar was. And so we can leave some time for that question as well. And I'll, while we're just giving some people some time, I'd like to thank our amazing panelists. Jane from Australia, I know it's quite late there. Elodie to have taken this on last minute. And Marcus in Brazil, thank you so much. And of course, to our audience, it was great to see the thoughtful questions and the participation. So maybe until next conversation, take care. And of course, be well. Thank you.
Thanks, Paula. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.